Hey, most videos about the Blackmagic Camera App look like this, but you don't actually learn anything. So in this video, I'm going to do it differently. I'm outside using real shots and showing you exactly what the settings do and when you should actually use them. So if this app has ever confused you, this will finally make it click. And by the end, you'll stop guessing and actually know what you're doing. So let's jump in. Let's start at top left on the camera lens icon. Tapping this will open the camera menu. And depending on your phone, your lenses may be different from what you see here. Here we have the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Then we have the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Tap the camera that you want to select, like this wide 13mm. We have our 1x camera at 24mm. That's the main lens and the best quality. Our 2x camera at 48mm, which is a cropping of the main camera's lens sensor. Next we have the 4x camera at 100mm, which is the telephoto lens. Then we have our 8x or 200mm tele lens, which again is a 2x cropping of the tele lens sensor. Now let's go back to the 24mm camera. And finally we have our front-facing camera, which is a large 24 megapixel square sensor. In front mode, it crops in for the standard 18 megapixel front camera. But on the wide mode, it uses the full sensor area for an ultra-wide field of view. When the camera lens is open, on the left you'll see a slider menu. This allows you to zoom in and zoom out of the camera you've chosen. This is actually a digital zoom, and it's less quality than the optical lenses, so I wouldn't suggest you use it if you can. If you do use it, you can reset it at the top of the slider. Try sticking to choosing the optical lenses on the right side of the menu if possible. To close this menu, just tap on the lens icon top left. In normal use, when you put something in front of the lens, it should lock onto it. And then when we move it out of the way, it'll refocus on the scene. So when I tap the screen, I'm telling the camera what part of the image to prioritize. You'll see the letters AE appear. That means exposure is now being based on this area. It's not locked yet, and the camera can still adjust it. Look at these icons on the right. This one is for focus, and this one is for exposure. You can see they have the small letter A next to them. This tells that they're in auto mode. But now if I tap and hold the screen, we see a circle called AE AF lock, and this has locked the auto exposure and auto focus on the target. Notice that now we have little lock symbols on the focus and the plus and minus icons. And now if we move it out of the way, the background stays blurry. If I move the target back to where it was, it's still in focus. Even if I pan the camera around, that point where we locked focus and exposure is where it stays. However, if we put the target back in the way, it's still in focus. But if I tap on the bushes, now the camera refocuses on that. Quick tip, if you don't like seeing the menus top and bottom of the screen, simply swipe up to hide them and swipe back down to return them. Next we have frame rate. Tapping this will bring up the frame rate slider where you can choose the frame rate that you want. You can choose from 24 to 120 frames per second basically. Now for normal shooting, use 24 or 30 in the US, or 25 if you're in a PAL region. If you want to shoot B-roll where you might want to slow it down, you can choose 60 frames or 120 frames per second, which will allow you to slow this down later on in post. I'll choose 30 frames per second as that works well for phone footage and social media platforms like YouTube. Then tap the frames per second icon again to close the menu. Look what happens when I tap on this bush. Now watch the shutter as I move the camera around. As I move towards a darker area in the shade, a shutter slows down to get more light to the lens. Then as I move back into a bright area, the shutter speeds up again to stop too much light getting to the lens. Now for getting the 1/over fraction, the higher the number, the faster the shutter is opening and closing. The lower the number, the slower the shutter is opening and closing, and that lets more light in when we're in darker areas. Now the effect of this is if the shutter is constantly changing as we move around, we'll get shifts in our exposure as we move from place to place. So to help this, we can tap and lock the screen to lock focus and exposure. So as we move around, the shutter is locked, so we don't get that exposure shift that we see when it's in auto. So for the correct motion blur, I'm sure you've heard of the 180-degree shutter rule, which is setting your shutter speed to double your frame rate. In our case, we have 30 frames per second. Our shutter should be at 1/60. And we can lock it at that setting by tapping the lock icon. Tap the shutter icon to close the menu. But on bright days, that slow shutter allows a lot of light in and blows out the image. So we can use a variable ND filter to help block the light. But how do we know what value to use? Well, one exposure tool we can use is the histogram on the lower left. Let's tap it to make it bigger. The histogram shows us our blown out highlights on the right side and the crushed blacks on the left. Also notice that the peaks are all the way to the right, saying it's too bright, and also the 3 red, green and blue traffic lights are lit up saying that we're overexposed. Now we can use a slider to change the opacity of the histogram so we can see the image behind it. So we know that we're too bright, and my variable ND filter is sitting at a value of 3. So now I'll turn it up to something like 6 until I see the peaks move into the center area. Now if you tap anywhere on the screen, it closes the histogram, and then tap it again to bring it back up. Here we can see that the peaks are more centered and the traffic lights have gone out. We can also do the same thing just watching the smaller histogram. So if I move my variable ND back to number 3, making it lighter again, we see that the peaks are moving to the right, and we see the RGB bar light up, saying that we're too overexposed. So I can move the variable ND to a higher number, which makes it darker. So the majority of the peaks are towards the center, and the RGB light bar goes out. So now we're at the 24mm camera. My frame rate is 30 frames per second. My shutter is fixed at 1/60, and our exposure is looking correct according to the histogram. But also, not just using the histogram, this is a great tool, but check it by eye also on the phone, just to make sure it looks correct to you. So phones have fixed apertures, unlike mirrorless cameras, where we may have a variable aperture in the lens. Here for this 24mm lens, we have an aperture of 1.8. For the wide 13mm lens, it's 2.2. And the 100mm lens, it's 2.8. Now I have a whole video on this, and I'll leave a link below in the description somewhere, so you can check it out. Now the thing to remember is the lower the value, the better it is, usually in low light. Next we have the timer in hours, minutes, seconds and frames. As you record, you'll see this counter moving. Now I've taken the ND filter back off, so we're still blown out. Our shutter is still locked at 1/60, and as you can see, the blue lock icon is next to it. So tap the plus minus button, then tap the auto button, and we see it's now changed the shutter to 1/5617 to correct for exposure to get it back to normal. To unlock it, tap it and unlock the shutter. So let's say we mess up and change the shutter and another value. We don't know where we are. To get back to full auto, hit the plus minus button, hit the auto button, and now everything resets back to full auto. But let's say you don't see the auto button. Let's say we change the shutter value and locked it. If you choose the plus minus button, and you may not see the auto button, it usually means something is locked. So tap on whatever is locked and then unlock it first. And now if we hit the plus minus button, we see we have the auto button available. And by clicking it, this sets everything back to full auto mode. And we can see this as the shutter, ISO and white balance all have the blue letter A next to them. Now we see that I removed the ND filter, So the software had to increase the shutter value to 1/5128 to get the exposure correct. So now we have the ND filter back on and the shutter is locked at 1/60 as before. Our ISO is at 100 and our histogram is centered. Now what happens if we move the camera into the shade? Watch the histogram. Because our shutter is locked, we see all the peaks have moved to the left. So it's saying it's too dark. So how can we brighten it up? Well, we could rotate our variable ND to get it lighter, and that's the best idea as we want to keep the ISO as low as we can, because if the ISO goes too high, it can cause noise and grain in the video. But let's try increasing our ISO value to about 800. And the histogram looks okay. But what does the camera really want? If I hit the plus minus button, we see that we don't have the auto button as the shutter is locked. So let's unlock it, and then we have the auto button. What does the camera software want the ISO to be? Here we can see it wants 1050 and slowed the shutter from 1/60 to 1/40 to increase light. So this is where the software increased the ISO to brighten the image. Now, as I said, the better method would have been to move the position of the variable ND so that it lets in more light and we don't have to change our shutter speed. We can also keep our ISO value low. Here we moved into the shade and our settings are all locked from the previous shot. We can see that the image is too dark as our histogram is all the way to the left. So instead of changing the ISO value, it's better to make our ND lighter to allow more light in. Watching our histogram, we'll move our VND from 7 to about 3 in this case. This allows us to keep all our values locked where we want them and keep our ISO value low so we don't introduce noise in the video. Now don't be afraid just to check the image by eye so that it looks correct to you as it does in real life. But using the histogram is a great little tool to make sure you're not too dark or too bright, so we can keep our settings correct the way we want them and use the variable ND to keep our exposure correct as we move from shot to shot. Next is white balance, and just like exposure, as you move around, white balance can shift between shots. Take a look at how the white balance in auto mode can change the colors in the scene. Look at how the green of the palms changes as the blue-gray shirt I was wearing affected the white balance. So it's better to lock white balance before we hit record. Tap the white balance icon and the menu will appear. Now tap the auto to turn it off. You can use a slider to set the Kelvin value on your scene. Going up to 10,000 Kelvin will make the image much warmer looking. Going the other way, to say 2500 Kelvin, makes it much cooler with blue tones. So how do we know what to choose? Well, there are some preset values here, so you don't have to guess. At the top is a sun icon. If we're filming on a bright sunny day like this, we can choose that. It's preset to 5600 Kelvin. Then we have incandescent bulbs for say indoor mixed lighting at 3200 Kelvin. If you're filming with mostly fluorescent tubes, choose this one at 4000 Kelvin. And if you're filming in shade, you can choose this at 4500 Kelvin. And if you're filming in a cloudy overcast day, choose this one at 6500 Kelvin. Here's a quick tip. Now cameras and phones are pretty good today at choosing white balance. So what you can do is first choose auto and see what the camera decides the white balance should be in the scene. Here we see it says 5400 Kelvin, and then just lock it, and this works fine. So now no matter where we move around in this scene or around the area, the white balance won't change. Keep in mind though, if we move from an area like this, which is full sun, into another area which is fully shaded, you should repeat the same step to get a new reading while you're filming in the shade. Here's another reason we want to lock our white balance before hitting record. Here we have the variable ND with the polarizer on the phone. We can see that I'm on the 24mm camera. My white balance is reading 6650 Kelvin. But what happens when I change it to the 13mm camera? We can see that the white balance now is 7170 Kelvin. Now the phone never moved, we just went to a wider lens. What happens if I go to my 200mm tele lens? or the 100mm tele. Depending on what the camera sees, it changes the white balance in auto. Let's set the white balance from manual to the sunny day preset and lock it. So now as we switch from camera to camera, the white balance stays the same. So always lock the white balance before recording. But you might say, why does it change in the first place if the phone didn't physically move? Well, a wider lens may pick up more blue sky, while a tighter lens sees more of the subject. So your camera is reading different colors all the time. And when you add the ND filter with the polarizer, this can shift colors even more. At the bottom of the lens menu, we have the zoom icon. Tap this and then tap the timer icon. Here we can move from one camera to the other and set the amount of time it takes to do this, up to 10 seconds. Let's choose, say, 5 seconds. Click off the timer icon. Now hit record. Now we can zoom from the 0.5x to the 1x camera, for example. Or we could go from 1x to 8x in another 5 seconds. I think if you move a large amount, the timer value needs to be longer. If you go from, say, 1x to 2x, then 4 to 5 seconds is good. Again, tap the icon to turn this off. Click on this top icon for some monitor tools. This is zebras, which will highlight when areas of the image are getting overexposed. Tap to turn the effect on and off at the top. You're able to set them, for example, to 85%, which is a good highlighted target and relates to the IRE scale or exposure levels on the color page. You can set the percentage value you want, and any areas over this will be highlighted. So think of zebras like a warning. When you see the stripes, that part of the image is getting too bright and close to losing detail. If important areas like faces or skies are covered in zebras, just lower your exposure until they disappear and are barely showing. At 85%, you're basically setting a safety line. Anything above that is starting to get blown out. Next is the focus monitor, and you can set this up in settings. So anything that shows up in red is what's in focus in the shot. You can use a slider to make it brighter, so you're able to see the monitor on a bright sunny day, for example. You can also change the color in settings. So you don't want it to be green if you're shooting green grass, for example. Next, we have the grids, like the rule of thirds, where you can line things up for your shot composition using the grid. This is a leveling target, so you can level the camera. Then you have a center cross, and finally a center dot. The main one you'll use is the rule of thirds grid, which is handy for horizons and lining things up vertically, like the sides of buildings or objects like this palm tree. Next is aspect ratios, where you can set some guides and they'll be grayed out. This will make sure that you can see where all your important elements are and be able to keep them in the scene, and they won't be out of the target areas. Now the gray areas are not recorded to the video. They're just on the monitor for you to use as a guide. So if you're going to reuse the video, for example, for vertical video, you can set the guides for 9:16. So you can make sure to line up what you want to make sure the important parts of the video fit within that range, so that you can shoot for vertical as well as landscape. Next is a safety area to set up. Let's say you're showing a product. You'll be able to see that you're not holding it too far out of frame. They can also be used so that when you drop in a title later on in post, you can use this as a visual guide on where they'll be within the shot. Next we have false color, which people use again for exposure checking, and especially skin tones. Let's say I'm going to adjust my shutter, and here we see it's totally overexposed by showing up as bright red. And this is more of an advanced topic that's not in the scope of this video. Now if you get totally lost and mess up some adjustments, and you just can't seem to get back to normal, go to Settings, scroll down to Reset, reset the Blackmagic Cam settings, reset camera settings, and this will take you right back to normal. If you find yourself in this situation where nothing seems to focus, but then you tap on the screen, on this bush, and then it refocuses. But placing something in front of the screen again, you have to tap on the screen to focus it. And then when I move out of frame, we see the bush is still blurry until I tap on the screen, and then the bush gets into focus. Click the second icon down, and we see that the autofocus button is not on. So let's turn on auto. Note, if you tap anywhere on the screen, it goes back to manual focus and turns off. Then because we manually focus on the bush, if I move something in front of the camera, it won't focus on it. Let's turn auto back on. Watch the numbers on the slider, and it's back in auto focus. Once I tap on the bush again, we're back in manual focus. If I bring these blocks into frame and they're not in focus, well, I could tap the blocks on the screen, or I can use a manual slider to manually focus the blocks. This could be used if you want to really make sure your product, for example, is exactly in focus. Hitting auto again puts back to autofocus. We can also use this as a rack focus effect. In manual focus, we tap on the doors and then they're in focus. Then we tap on the plants nearest to us and they're in focus. Then it's tap on the doors again and it switches. And here's the result. To get to your captured videos, click on Media. Here is all your captured files. Click on the one that you want to review, and you can review it. You can also share it or save it to files, for example, to offload them. So next we have LUTs. Tap here and this slider appears. So we see it says off and no LUTs are enabled. So go to Settings, go to LUTs. We can enable them at the top. At the bottom, you can import your LUTs and export or delete them. Once loaded, you can individually turn them on and off. Go back to Record, and we now see them and we can turn them on. Now we can scroll through and see their effect on the image. Now what everyone tells you to do is go to Settings, Record, Color Space, and select Log Files. Now with the LUTs off, we can see a log file is a very flat image that's supposed to look like this, and it's shot like this to capture more dynamic range, and it's supposed to be color corrected later on in post-editing. This is not the finished look. But now when we turn on the LUTs, we have one called Rec 709 Neutral. If you shoot in log, you could use this to see what it would look like when it's color graded to Rec 709, which is a standard color space that we all see on our monitors, TVs, and phones. Now the other LUTs are Creative LUTs that look awful directly on the log footage itself. Now if you want to shoot an Apple log and you don't want to color correct your footage, you could apply or burn in the Rec 709 Neutral LUT directly onto your flat log footage by clicking this icon at the bottom. Notice that the top left icon goes red, letting you know that this LUT will be applied directly onto your log footage when you record. So let's turn it off and record a log clip. Now let's turn the LUTs on and select to apply the Rec. 709 neutral LUT to the clip and then press record. So that's what a conversion LUT does, is convert your log footage to Rec. 709. These other LUTs look bad on log footage, and they work better when applied to Rec. 709 footage. So back in settings, let's change your color space back to Rec. 709. This picture hopefully makes it easier to understand. Log footage looks flat, so we need to use a conversion LUT to Rec. 709 to get it back to a normal looking color space. Then Creative LUTs can be applied on top of footage that's already converted to Rec. 709 or shot in Rec. 709. So basically, make sure the LUT you're applying to your log footage is a conversion to Rec. 709 LUT, otherwise it won't look right. Here we can see what each Creative LUT looks like on the Rec. 709 footage. So let's turn them off and just shoot a normal Rec. 709 clip. Now turn our LUTs back on, and we can scroll through and see what our Creative LUTs will look like on the normal Rec. 709 color space. Now with the bottom button turned off, this shows us what each LUT would look like if we applied it. But with the bottom button off, it won't apply it and won't burn it directly to the footage if you hit record. Also notice that the LUT button on the top left of the screen is not red. Let's scroll through and let's choose one called Vivid. Now let's click the Apply button at the bottom of the slider and it turns blue. And notice that the top left LUT icon is now red. This means that when we hit record, this LUT will be applied to our clip. And here's the result. So in the media files, if we click on the clip, we see this is a log footage. But if we click this file, it shows that you have a LUT that has been applied to it. Now this isn't actually on the video, but it allows you to see which clips have LUTs that are burned into them or been applied to them in the media section. This next clip doesn't show the LUT icon, so no LUT has been applied to it, and so on. This lower icon is for stabilization modes. We have off, standard, cinematic, and extreme. The standard is the same as used by the internal iPhone native camera app. And that does help, especially when doing handheld footage. Note also when you do stabilization, there's a small image crop introduced. Here we see that we're using a phone, and it shows that in our current recording state, we have over 19 hours of available recording time left on the phone. Tapping this microphone icon enlarges it. If you have an external mic attached, you'll get a slider here that allows you to adjust the gain so it doesn't go into the red area and causes clipping. Tap anywhere else on the screen to close it. A great feature for solo filmers is you can now use the app on your Apple Watch as a remote control. So you're able to set up your composition remotely, but not only can you do start and stop recording, it also supports almost all the same features as the phone app by using the crown button and the 3 dots on the screen. So if you're a solo filmer, this is really handy. Now let's take a look at important settings. Let's set up our settings for real life recording. Start at record, choose codec. Forget all these other codecs like ProRes. The files are huge and you'll know if you want to choose them. So let's keep things realistic and choose HEVC H.265. These are high quality, low file sizes which are great for you to record in for normal use. And we can keep the bitrate on high. In resolution, choose 4K, and for color space, choose Rec. 709. Now this is what we see on all of our phones, TVs and monitors, and social media. As we saw in the LUTS section, if you choose Apple Log, you'll get a flat image and you'll need to color grade it. So for us, if you want good looking footage straight out of camera, choose Rec. 709. And this will need very little color correction. In camera, make sure to enable vertical video. This means that if you shoot vertical content, when you rotate your phone, it uses a full screen and the menus also rotate so you can see them correctly. I turn use volume button to trigger recording off, as when I put my phone into a phone holder, more times than not it clamps down on the volume button and starts recording when I don't want to. I also turn off dim screen while recording. I think this is to save battery life, but I'd rather see the screen as it records. For shutter measurement, it can be in speed or angle. So if you're using the 180-degree shutter rule, no matter what frame rate you choose, you can simply set the shutter speed to 180. And as we see here, on bright days, we'd need an ND filter. Make sure you lock white balance on record, so that even if you forget it on the main menu, it'll automatically lock it when you start recording. Flicker free is a setting for your camera. You can set it to 50 Hz for if you live in Europe, or 60 Hz for the USA, Canada, and Mexico. This helps reduce flicker if you start seeing fluorescent tubes and lights flickering in the videos. So we should have H.265, 4K, and Rec. 709. So putting this all together, let's set up our settings to film this shot on a sunny day. I'll change my frame rate to 30 frames per second. And I'll set my shutter to 1/60 and lock it. Now I'll place on a variable ND filter, but as we can see, the image still looks too bright. Checking the histogram, we see all the peaks are over to the right side, and the traffic lights are lit up telling us that we're overexposed. So to adjust for this, I need to change my ND filter to a darker value by monitoring the histogram, and we see the peaks are more centered after we adjust it. Don't worry if you see some spikes at one side or the other. Just get the majority of the peaks around the middle. Plus use your eyes to see when the shot looks correct to you as it does in real life. Our ISO is nice and low at 80, and all we need to do is set our white balance. We can see here that it's set at 7000 Kelvin, but this image looks a little too warm for me, or too yellow. So I can take it off auto and manually change it with the slider, or pick the sun preset because we're filming on a sunny day. Now it sets it to 5600 Kelvin, and everything looks better to my eye. It looks more natural. So I'll lock it here. So it all looks good, and we can hit record. Let's just tap focus and press the record button. Okay, thanks for watching. And if you want to take your mobile filmmaking to the next level, subscribe and check out the next video coming up. I'll see you next time.